True story, my family thought I was too old and weak to fight back. Until they saw my will. Have you ever poured your entire being into loving someone, sacrificing your own peace, your own happiness, all your resources, only to feel like an endless well they draw from without a single drop of gratitude? Have you felt the slow, soul-crushing realization that you are not seen, not valued, but merely used? I have. And for far too long, I allowed that insidious pain to define me, letting it eat away at my spirit, whispering to myself that one day, my unwavering devotion would finally be recognized, finally returned. But it never was. My generosity was taken, again and again, until there was nothing left but a hollowed-out shell of the woman I once was. That's how it truly felt, anyway, until the day a quiet, internal voice, long silenced, finally screamed, "No more." Until the day I finally, irrevocably, learned the greatest lesson of my life, that sometimes, the most profound act of love you can offer isn't to others, but to yourself, the love strong enough to finally say, enough. It was a Tuesday afternoon, a particularly bright, crisp autumn day that painted my world in hues of gold and rust. The kind of day that usually fills my small cottage with a comforting warmth, a gentle hush that invites quiet reflection. I remember being in my kitchen, humming an old, forgotten tune from a bygone era, my fingers deftly arranging a freshly picked bouquet of chrysanthemums from my garden. Their cheerful yellow petals seemed to radiate a simple, unadulterated joy. I remember thinking how lucky I was, even at 78, to still find such profound contentment in these quiet, everyday moments. My son, Sterling, was supposed to be at work, his days filled with the endless demands of his executive position, or so he often claimed. His wife, Briar, typically out somewhere, perhaps at an exclusive boutique or a leisurely lunch with her equally well-heeled friends, always pursuing the next trend or acquisition. The house, usually a sanctuary of silence when they were out, was quiet, or so I believed. Then, I heard it. Sterling's voice. It was loud, booming, resonating from his study, carrying through the thin wall that separated our living spaces in the cottage, a cottage that was technically mine, but which they had, over the years, increasingly treated as an extension of their own sprawling suburban domain. The study door was ajar, and his voice, unusually boisterous, echoed with an almost childlike glee. "Oh, it's going to be absolutely epic, Mum," he boomed into the phone. My heart, a frail, hopeful thing, fluttered a little in my chest. Mum? He rarely called me Mum anymore, usually opting for a dismissive Elara or a perfunctory mother when he wanted something. What could be so epic that it brought such unadulterated joy to his voice? My curiosity, usually a gentle, fleeting flicker, began to peak, settling into a persistent hum. I paused, the vase of water heavy in my hand, listening, a faint smile forming on my lips, ready to share in whatever exciting news he was about to impart. Yes, all arranged. 3 glorious weeks in Italy, then a magnificent week in France. Briar's already got her entire new wardrobe picked out for Paris, can you believe it? The kids are absolutely beside themselves with excitement, especially with that bespoke art history tour of Florence we booked for them. Imagine seeing the David in person, Mum. My smile, which had been slowly, tentatively forming, faltered, then dissolved completely, replaced by a cold, unsettling dread. Italy? France? An entire month? A family heritage tour? The words hammered into me with the force of physical blows. We had talked about a trip like that, years ago, my late husband, Arthur, and I. He'd always dreamed of showing me the rolling Tuscan hills, the vibrant art of Florence, the quiet majesty of the French countryside. After he passed, a piece of my heart went with him, but the dream lingered. I'd mentioned it to Sterling, subtly hinting at a family trip, a way for us all to connect, to revisit some of the places Arthur had cherished. He'd just nodded vaguely, as he always did when I brought up anything that didn't involve a direct, immediate transfer of funds. His usual response was a non-committal shrug, a hurried change of subject, or a sudden, feigned urgency to be elsewhere. A cold, hard knot began to tighten, then twist, in my stomach. I stood frozen, the vase of water still in my trembling hand, my ears straining, desperate to hear more, yet dreading every word. This was my money, of course. I had established that European travel fund years ago, a meticulously managed account, specifically earmarked for a grand family trip that I would lead, a way to share the world, the beauty, the history, with my loved ones. I'd even told Sterling about it, explicitly, asked him to look into dates that would work for everyone, for our family, including me. But he hadn't mentioned this. Not a single word. No excited planning sessions, no shared anticipation, no consultation whatsoever. Just this triumphant, secretive announcement. Then Briar's voice, chirpy and a little too loud, interjected from the background, her words cutting through the air like shards of glass. "Oh, and don't forget the private chef we've hired for the villa in Tuscany, darling. Elara would never have approved, but it's our trip, after all. We can finally do things our way." My hand trembled violently, sloshing water onto the polished antique wood floor, the water spreading like an ink stain, mirroring the darkness spreading within me. A private chef? My money, the funds I had painstakingly saved and invested, used for a private chef, a luxury I wouldn't even indulge in myself, while I sat here, arranging chrysanthemums, in the very cottage they were dismissing me from? The knot in my stomach became a searing, painful cramp, radiating outwards. Sterling chuckled, a sound that grated on my nerves, echoing his wife's dismissive tone. No, she wouldn't have. And honestly, Mum, between you and me, she'd only slow us down, wouldn't she? All her old-fashioned ways, and her frailty. She's just not up for that kind of strenuous travel anymore. It's better this way, you know? A proper, unencumbered family adventure. We'll send her postcards, of course. A lovely set of postcards from all the places we visit. He said it so casually, so utterly dismissively, as if discussing an inconvenient piece of baggage that had fortunately been left behind. Frailty. Slow us down. Old-fashioned ways. As if I were a cumbersome antique, a dusty piece of furniture to be stored away in the attic while the grand party went on downstairs, funded by me, and enjoyed by them. Postcards. Postcards for the woman who was funding the entire unencumbered family adventure, the one whose lifelong dream was to share such a journey with her family. The blood drained from my face, leaving me feeling hollow and lightheaded, as if all my life force had suddenly evaporated. It wasn't just the exclusion, though that was a sharp, piercing pain that stabbed at the very core of my being. It was the deliberate, casual cruelty of it. The complete, utter lack of consideration, of empathy, of basic human decency. The smug, entitled tone in their voices, celebrating my absence, my supposed infirmity. They weren't just going on a trip, they were actively, joyfully, excluding me, the very source of their boundless joy, and then justifying it with a lie, a fabricated narrative about my health, my capabilities, my frailty. I remember gripping the edge of the counter, my knuckles turning white, the wood digging into my palms. The chrysanthemums, usually so vibrant, so full of life, suddenly seemed to mock me with their cheerful yellow, their innocent beauty a stark contrast to the ugliness I had just witnessed. All those years, all those silent sacrifices, all those desperate hopes for their love and respect, for a genuine connection, and this was the thanks I got. Overheard, like a forgotten servant eavesdropping from the shadows, while they planned their lavish, European tour on my dime, congratulating themselves on how much better it would be without the burden of my presence. A tremor started deep within me, not of sadness, not of the familiar, dull ache of disappointment, but of a cold, quiet fury I hadn't felt in decades. It wasn't a sudden, explosive burst, but a slow, deliberate burn, like embers finally catching fire after years of smoldering beneath layers of ash. My illusion of family love, the fragile, meticulously constructed edifice I had painstakingly built over half a century, didn't just crack. It shattered, irrevocably, into a million tiny, sharp shards, each one reflecting a painful memory, a forgotten slight. And in that moment, standing in my sunlit kitchen, the scent of chrysanthemums filling the air, listening to my son and his wife plan their grand tour, a single, undeniable thought solidified in my mind: this was the end. The absolute, unchangeable, definitive end of my silent suffering, of my endless giving. So how did we get here, you might ask? How does a mother, a grandmother, a woman who only ever wanted to nurture and love, come to a point where her own flesh and blood would so casually, so cruelly, cut her out of their lives while feasting on her boundless generosity? It wasn't a sudden shift, you see. Oh no, it was a slow, insidious erosion, like the relentless sea constantly wearing away at a cliff face, not with a single wave, but with countless, relentless tides, until one day, the whole thing just collapses, crumbling into the churning abyss below. Arthur, my dear Arthur, he was the love of my life. He was a man of quiet strength, boundless humor, and unwavering integrity. We met when I was just 20, a young woman full of dreams, and he, a budding entrepreneur with a twinkle in his eye and a drive that promised a bright future. Our life together was a tapestry woven with shared laughter, small triumphs, and the deep, comforting silence of true companionship. When he passed, leaving me a widow at 72, the world felt as though it had stopped spinning. But he also left me something else, a substantial fortune, built meticulously from his textile business, a legacy of his foresight and hard work. He was a shrewd businessman, always thinking ahead, always planning for the future, and he wanted to make sure I was comfortable, secure, for the rest of my days. He also wanted to ensure our family was taken care of, that Sterling and his future children would have a solid foundation. That was his will, his enduring legacy, a testament to his generous spirit. And for a long time, I tried, truly tried, to honor it in the way I thought best, by supporting them, by showering them with love and, yes, with money, hoping beyond hope that it would translate into the deep, unbreakable family bond one yearned for, the kind Arthur had always envisioned. Sterling, my only son, was always as ambitious. From a young age, he dreamed big, spoke of grand ventures, but he often lacked the follow-through, the meticulous planning, or the crucial financial acumen that distinguished his father. He was charismatic, charming even, capable of painting vivid pictures of success, but the foundation beneath those visions was often shaky. I remember when he was just starting out, fresh out of university, full of grand pronouncements about his future empire, but consistently falling short on rent, needing a little boost here and there. I always provided it, telling myself it was just a temporary phase, a young man finding his footing. When he decided to marry Briar, a woman whose tastes were, shall we say, rather extravagant, I saw it as my sacred duty to help them, to ensure their happiness, to give them the comfortable start Arthur would have wanted. I remember meeting Briar for the first time. She was undeniably beautiful, sleek and polished, but there was a certain sharpness to her gaze, a calculating glint that made me uneasy. She spoke of her aspirations, her desire for the finer things, and I remember a quiet voice in the back of my mind whispering a warning, but I dismissed it, eager for my son's happiness. Their first home, a sprawling suburban house that was far beyond what Sterling's entry-level management job could ever afford. I paid the down payment, a significant sum that depleted a substantial portion of my immediate savings. And then, when they struggled, inevitably, with the crushing weight of the mortgage payments after Briar decided her true calling was interior decorating, which mostly involved spending rather than earning, I quietly covered those, too. Every single month, for years, the payments would leave my account, a silent act of support that I believed was nurturing their growing family. Did they ever directly ask? Oh, not directly at first. It would start with a casual lament about the crushing burden of their mortgage, a weary sigh about how things were so tight this month, a subtle hint about a looming deadline. And then, I would step in, always. I always stepped in. Because that's what mothers do, isn't it? That's how you show your love, your unwavering support. Or so I desperately told myself, trying to quiet the nagging unease. Then came the grandchildren. 2 beautiful girls, Amelia and Clara. My heart, which had felt so empty after Arthur's passing, melted the moment I saw them, 2 tiny bundles of pure innocence and joy. And suddenly, the requests weren't just for Sterling and Briar. They were for the children's future, for their best start in life, a phrase that always tugged at my deepest maternal instincts. Private school tuition? The public schools just aren't good enough, Mother. Our girls deserve the best start in life, a chance to truly excel. Of course, they did. My precious granddaughters deserved every opportunity. So, the tuition bills, hefty and unyielding, started landing on my desk, addressed to me, not theirs. Ballet lessons, equestrian clubs, coding camps, elite summer programs, every elite extracurricular activity imaginable. I paid for it all, without question, without hesitation. I wanted them to have everything I perhaps hadn't had, everything Arthur would have wanted for them. I wanted to be the loving, generous grandmother they cherished, the one they would run to with open arms and joyful stories. I wanted them to know I was there for them, always, an unwavering presence of love and security. But the gratitude, if it was ever truly there, a faint, fragile bloom, began to wear thin. It faded, slowly but surely, into an unshakable expectation. A new luxury car for Sterling, because his old one was simply embarrassing for his new promotion. A designer handbag for Briar, because she deserved a treat after a particularly stressful shopping trip that had apparently exhausted her. Extravagant family vacations to the Caribbean, ski trips to Aspen, safaris in Africa. We just can't afford it this year, Mother, but the girls would be so disappointed. You know how much they're looking forward to this. And then the tickets, the hotel bookings, the entire exorbitant cost of the trip would mysteriously appear on my credit card statement, often without a single word of discussion beforehand. I never said a word. I just paid. My silence was my sacrifice, my hope for their affection. I remember one Christmas Eve, about 5 years ago. I had spent weeks carefully selecting and wrapping gifts for everyone, truly thoughtful presents that spoke to their individual interests. For Sterling, a first edition of a classic adventure novel he'd mentioned loving as a child, a book full of nostalgic wonder. For Briar, a rare antique brooch I'd found after much searching, a piece of delicate artistry I thought she might appreciate. For the girls, educational toys and beautifully illustrated books, things that would spark their imagination, not just entertain. When they arrived, laden with their own mountain of flashy, expensive gifts, they barely glanced at mine. Sterling quickly opened his book, scanned the title, then set it aside with a perfunctory, "Oh, this old thing." "Thanks, Mum." Briar took one look at the brooch, then tucked it into her purse, muttering, charming. "You know, I actually prefer modern pieces now, Elara. But it's sweet you thought of me." The girls tore open their presents with frenzied excitement, then immediately looked up, faces expectantly, and asked if I had brought any cash, because their friends got gift cards to the mall, which were much cooler. I felt a profound coldness spread through me then, a sense of deep, aching disappointment that went beyond the superficiality of the gifts. It wasn't about the gifts themselves. It was about the utter lack of appreciation, the casual dismissal, the thinly veiled contempt. It was about the expectation that I would simply provide, without any real thought or feeling behind it. It was about the fact that they saw my generosity not as a heartfelt gift, but as a right. My right to give, their inherent, unquestionable right to receive. Over the years, the subtle hints became outright demands, delivered with increasing frequency and decreasing politeness. "We need an extension on the house, Mother. The girls need their own bathrooms now, they're practically teenagers, and it's just not fair for them to share. Sterling really needs a new golf club membership, Elara, for networking. It's an investment, really, for his career." They would talk over me, interrupt me mid-sentence, dismiss my opinions as quaint or old-fashioned. They would exclude me from their social gatherings, claiming the events were too lively for me, or that I wouldn't know anyone. And when I would gently try to suggest moderation, or even hint at my own quiet loneliness, my desire for their company, they would expertly turn it around, making me feel guilty for even suggesting such a thing. "We're just so busy, Mother, trying to keep up with everything. You should be glad we're thriving, thanks to you. We're working so hard for the girls' future." I clung to the fragile hope that one day, they would see. One day, they would realize the depth of my love, the extent of my quiet sacrifices, the sheer volume of my emotional and financial investment. That they would finally embrace me, not for my wallet, not for my seemingly bottomless well of funds, but for me, Elara, their mother, their grandmother. I'd spend holidays alone, or with a few cherished old friends, while they jetted off on another lavish vacation I'd paid for. I'd see photos on social media, the happy family, smiling, laughing, living the perfect, sun-drenched life I'd meticulously, painstakingly, funded with every fiber of my being. And I'd tell myself, again and again, like a mantra, it's for them. It's for the family. It's all for love. But it wasn't. It was for a ghost, a phantom limb of family love that simply wasn't there, a mirage I had constructed in my own mind, desperately clinging to. And slowly, agonizingly, I began to realize that all my giving, all my boundless generosity, had not earned me their love or respect. It had only earned me their contempt, their casual dismissal, and their profound, unshakable entitlement. My heart, which had once felt like a bottomless well of unconditional love, was now a parched, desolate landscape, cracked and dry. And that overheard phone call, that casual cruelty about my frailty, delivered with such ease and self-congratulation, was the final, devastating sandstorm that buried everything. The well was dry. And I was tired. So incredibly, utterly, bone-weary tired of pouring myself into a void that only expanded with every drop. What would you have done? How much more could you have taken before something inside you just snapped? I had given them my heart, my time, my emotional energy, and every single penny they had ever asked for, all in the desperate, misguided hope of earning their affection, of securing my place in their lives. And what did I get in return? A patronizing lie, a dismissive wave, and an invitation to receive postcards from a lavish trip I had funded, a trip I was deemed too frail to join. The anger, that quiet, burning rage that had ignited in my kitchen, solidified into something cold, clear, and utterly resolute. It wasn't a childish fit of pique, a fleeting moment of irritation. It was a profound, almost spiritual awakening, a fundamental shift in my understanding of myself and my relationships. I looked around my quiet kitchen, at the wilting chrysanthemums I'd abandoned in my shock, and I saw clearly for the very first time. I wasn't an elder matriarch to be revered, I was an ATM, a forgotten relic, a means to an end, a convenient resource to be tapped at will. And I had allowed it. I had enabled it. I had, in my desperate need for their love, become complicit in my own exploitation. The very next morning, the sun rose, casting familiar golden light across my bedroom, but it felt different. The air was charged, not with sadness or despair, but with a palpable sense of purpose, a quiet determination. I hadn't slept much that night. Instead, I had lain awake, my mind sifting through decades of memories, each one a little sting, a little indignity, a little lie I had told myself to justify their behavior and my own endless giving. I revisited every subtle hint, every dismissive comment, every forgotten birthday, every unspoken demand. By dawn, the decision was not just made, it was etched into my very soul, as permanent and unyielding as the granite beneath the earth. I picked up the phone. My hand, which had trembled just 2 days ago, was remarkably steady, imbued with a newfound strength. The first call was to Mr. Davies, my private banker. He's a kind man, always impeccably dressed, with a gentle smile and a discreet manner. He has handled Arthur's and my accounts for years, and he knows our family history, our financial structure, better than anyone. He was more than just a banker, he was a trusted confidant. Mr. Davies, I began, my voice surprisingly firm, lacking any trace of hesitation, I need to make some significant changes to my financial arrangements. Immediately. There was a slight, almost imperceptible pause on the other end, a moment of professional assessment. Of course, Mrs. Vancroft. How can I assist you this morning? I want to dismantle all the trusts, I said, and I felt a strange, exhilarating sense of liberation as the words, heavy with consequence, left my lips. Every single one. The Sterling Vancroft Family Trust, which covers their mortgage and general living expenses, the grandchildren's educational fund, for Amelia and Clara's private school tuition and extracurriculars, the European travel fund, all of them. I want them dissolved. Completely. I could almost hear him blinking on the other end, processing the magnitude of my request. Mrs. Vancroft, are you quite sure? These trusts were carefully structured for the long-term benefit of your family, as per Mr. Vancroft's wishes. There are very significant funds involved, Mrs. Vancroft. His voice held a note of genuine concern, a rare deviation from his usual professional neutrality. I am absolutely sure, Mr. Davies, I reiterated, my voice unwavering, radiating a quiet authority. And I want all direct payments, all automated transfers to Sterling, Briar, or the girls, stopped. Effective immediately. Their credit cards that are linked to my accounts? Cancelled. All of them. Without exception. He cleared his throat, a soft, almost nervous sound. Understood. This is a substantial restructuring, Mrs. Vancroft. May I ask, is everything all right? Is there anything I should be aware of? I paused, considering. Should I tell him the whole humiliating story? Should I confide in this kind, professional man, lay bare the betrayal? No. My dignity, what little I felt I had left after years of their casual cruelty, was paramount. Everything is perfectly all right, Mr. Davies, I replied, my tone leaving no room for further questioning. I'm simply making some adjustments to my financial legacy. It's time for a new direction. A new purpose for these funds. He sensed my resolve, the iron will beneath my calm exterior. Very well, Mrs. Vancroft. I will initiate the paperwork right away. We'll need your signature on a few documents. I can have them couriered over to your cottage this afternoon, or you could come into the branch if you prefer. Excellent, I said, a small, almost imperceptible smile touching my lips. Courier is fine. And one more thing, Mr. Davies. I want to establish a new charitable foundation. It will be called the Forgotten Elders Foundation. Its purpose will be to provide support, companionship, and dignified care for elderly individuals who have been neglected, isolated, or abandoned by their families. I want a significant portion of the funds from the dissolved trusts, not all, but a substantial amount, transferred directly to this new foundation. I want to be hands-on with its establishment, its mission. I want to ensure it makes a real, tangible difference in the lives of those who truly need it, not those who merely demand it. The silence on the other end was longer this time, a deeper contemplation. But when he spoke, there was a new note in his voice, not just professionalism, but genuine admiration and respect. That's a truly commendable endeavor, Mrs. Vancroft. A noble cause. We can certainly facilitate that. I'll put you in touch with our philanthropic advisor immediately to discuss the legal and operational aspects of setting up such a foundation. We have extensive experience in this area. The second call was to my lawyer, Mrs. Thompson. She was a no-nonsense woman, sharp, efficient, and direct, with eyes that saw right through any pretense. Mrs. Thompson, I began, without preamble, I need your immediate assistance with some urgent family matters. I'm revoking my power of attorney over Sterling. I'm also revising my will, effective immediately. Sterling's inheritance will be significantly altered. And I want to make it absolutely clear that the majority of the funds are to be redirected to the Forgotten Elders Foundation, with only a very modest, specific amount designated for Sterling and the girls, held in a new, strictly managed trust for their basic needs, housing, food, and basic education, no longer under their direct control, and only accessible under very specific, strict conditions I will outline in detail. She didn't bat an eyelid. She was, I suppose, quite used to family drama, to the often ugly realities of inheritance disputes. Understood, Mrs. Vancroft, she said, her voice crisp and professional. I'll draw up the necessary amendments and documents. When would you like to come in to sign them? This afternoon would work for me, if that's convenient for you. This afternoon, I said, my voice radiating an iron will I hadn't known I possessed, a strength that had been lying dormant for decades. The sooner, the better. As I hung up the phone, a profound, almost overwhelming sense of peace washed over me, a sensation so deep and pervasive it felt physical. It wasn't the peace of resignation, or the hollow calm of defeat, but the invigorating, liberating peace of reclaiming my own agency, my own life, my own future. It felt as though a crushing, invisible weight had been lifted from my shoulders, a burden I hadn't even realized I was carrying until it was gone, leaving me feeling light, almost buoyant. The internal conflict, the gnawing guilt, the paralyzing fear of their reaction, it was all still there, a faint, lingering echo, but it was utterly overshadowed by a quiet, triumphant joy. I had done it. After all these years, all those decades of silently suffering their casual cruelty, I had finally said enough. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt truly, completely, authentically myself. What would they do, I wondered, a flicker of something akin to amusement dancing within me. How would they react when their endless well of resources finally, irrevocably, ran dry? The thought, surprisingly, didn't fill me with dread, but with a strange, almost defiant, anticipation. I was ready. Of course, my decision was going to have consequences, wasn't it? When an inexhaustible ATM suddenly goes out of service, the withdrawals tend to bounce. And when those withdrawals are the lifeblood of a lavish, unearned existence, the reaction is rarely calm. It didn't take long. 48 hours, to be exact. 2 short days for their carefully constructed world to begin its inevitable, painful collapse. The first sign was a frantic, shrill phone call from Briar. Elara. What in the world is going on? My new Prada bag was declined. My credit card isn't working. It's absolutely mortifying. She sounded more annoyed, more inconvenienced, as if I had personally, maliciously, disrupted her sacred shopping spree, rather than genuinely worried about the implications. I kept my voice even, calm, a stark contrast to her rising hysteria. Briar, I've made some changes to my financial arrangements. I'm no longer supporting your discretionary spending. Or any spending, for that matter. What do you mean, no longer supporting? She shrieked, her voice reaching a pitch only dogs could hear. This is outrageous. Sterling's business account is frozen too. And the girl's tuition payment just bounced. Do you know how embarrassing this is? The school called. The bank called. Everyone knows. I'm sure it is, I replied, feeling not a shred of sympathy, only a quiet sense of justice. Perhaps it's time you learned what it feels like to earn your own way, to manage your own finances, to experience the consequences of your choices. And with that, with a click that resonated with profound finality, I hung up. I could hear her sputtering, a choked sound of disbelief and rage, but I didn't care. The phone rang again, almost immediately. It was Sterling. I let it go to voicemail, listening to his increasingly agitated messages. Then Briar again, her voice cracking with fury. Then Sterling, then Briar. The incessant buzzing became a dull throb, a persistent, irritating symphony of indignation, but it couldn't penetrate the newfound peace within me. I knew they wouldn't just take a phone call for an answer. They never had. They always had to get their way, to manipulate, to dominate. And so, the very next afternoon, there they were. Sterling, his face already beet red, Briar, her perfectly coiffed hair slightly disheveled, her features contorted into a mask of furious disbelief, and even the 2 granddaughters, Amelia, 16, and Clara, 14, standing on my porch. They looked like a perfectly styled, yet utterly panicked, tableau from a high-end magazine, their designer clothes suddenly seeming ill-fitting, their expressions a mixture of confusion and genuine fear, as if the world they had always known had suddenly gone topsy-turvy. I opened the door, a serene, almost detached smile on my face. Sterling. Briar. Girls. What a surprise. To what do I owe this unexpected visit? My voice was calm, almost detached, a stark contrast to the swirling maelstrom brewing on their faces. Sterling immediately burst out, his carefully constructed composure crumbling. Mother! What have you done? My accounts are empty. Our mortgage payment didn't go through. The bank called. Do you know the kind of trouble we're in? Everything is falling apart. He looked genuinely panicked, not just about money, but about the carefully constructed facade of his entire life, the illusion of success he had so desperately clung to. Briar, ever the dramatics, stepped forward, clutching her designer handbag, which I noticed was now rather worn, perhaps a silent testament to the recent financial cutoffs, to her chest like a shield. Elara, this isn't funny. The European trip, it's all booked. The deposits are non-refundable. Our agents just called, saying the funds have been pulled. What about our heritage tour? What about the girls' education? Their future? You've jeopardized everything. Amelia, usually so aloof, so dismissive of my presence, chimed in, her voice edged with genuine fear, a tremor I had never heard before. Grandma, Mrs. Peterson from school called. She said we might not be able to go on the Italy trip next month if tuition isn't paid. And my phone just got cut off. It's dead. Clara nodded beside her, her eyes wide, tears threatening. My smile didn't waver, though a tiny flicker of something akin to victory ignited within me. I invited them in, gesturing to the living room, to the very antique armchairs I had painstakingly reupholstered years ago, furniture they often deemed old-fashioned. They hesitantly sat, perching on the very edge, as if afraid to fully commit, their posture reflecting their unease. Sit down, everyone, I said, my voice gentle but firm, as I calmly poured myself a steaming cup of chamomile tea from the pot I had just brewed. Let's discuss this like adults. I took a slow, deliberate sip, letting the silence hang heavy in the air, allowing their panic to truly simmer, to reach a crescendo. Sterling, unable to contain himself, finally exploded, his voice cracking with a mixture of rage and self-pity. Discuss? There's nothing to discuss. You've completely ruined us. You've betrayed your own family. How could you do this, Mother? After everything we've done for you? I set my teacup down, the delicate porcelain clinking softly against the saucer, a stark contrast to his furious outburst. My gaze, usually soft and yielding, hardened, becoming as sharp and unyielding as flint. Everything you've done for me, Sterling? I echoed, my voice low, dangerous, barely above a whisper, yet it cut through the air with chilling clarity. Tell me, what exactly have you done for me, besides emptying my bank accounts and treating me like an inconvenient relic, a silent benefactor to be endured, not cherished? Briar scoffed, a brittle, defiant sound. We've given you family, Elara. We've given you grandchildren. We've included you in our lives. We've made sure you weren't alone. Included me? I raised an eyebrow, a slow, deliberate movement that spoke volumes. Oh, really? Was I included when you meticulously planned a month-long European family heritage tour on my dime, a trip I had dreamt of for decades, but deliberately omitted me from the invitation, claiming I was too frail to travel and would only slow you down? Their faces, which had been contorted in anger and indignation, now went completely blank, as if a switch had been flipped. Sterling visibly paled, his bravado instantly deflating like a punctured balloon. Briar's jaw dropped, her carefully applied makeup unable to hide the shock. The girls exchanged wide-eyed, terrified glances, their youthful faces suddenly showing a flicker of understanding, of shame. They hadn't expected me to know. They hadn't expected me to have overheard. You heard that? Sterling stammered, his voice barely a whisper, a pathetic shadow of his earlier booming tone. Every word, I confirmed, a flicker of something akin to satisfaction, cold and righteous, igniting within me. Every dismissive, ungrateful, self-serving word. I heard you tell your mother that I was too frail, too old, too much of a burden. I heard Briar congratulate herself on using my money for a private chef I would never approve of, celebrating my absence. I heard it all. And it shattered what little illusion I had left. A tense, suffocating silence descended upon the room, broken only by the rhythmic, mournful tick-tock of the grandfather clock in the hall, each tick echoing the passage of wasted years. They looked like caught children, their grand, entitled charades suddenly exposed, stripped bare. But that was just talk, Elara, Briar finally managed, her voice weak, desperate, a pathetic attempt at damage control. We were just discussing logistics. You know, just throwing ideas around. Logistics that involved a deliberate, malicious lie about my health and a blatant act of disrespect, all while spending my money, which you viewed as yours by right. I finished for her, my voice unwavering, laced with a quiet power. For decades, I have been your silent ATM, a convenient, inexhaustible source of funds. I've funded your mortgages, your luxury cars, your designer clothes, your private school tuitions, your extravagant vacations across the globe. I did it, Sterling, because I desperately wanted your love. I wanted your respect. I wanted to be part of this family you so casually excluded me from, the family I thought we were. I leaned forward slightly, my gaze sweeping over each of them, my voice still calm, but radiating an undeniable authority, an almost chilling resolve. But all I got was contempt. All I got was endless demands, a constant stream of requests, and a complete, utterly deafening lack of gratitude. You didn't see me as your mother, Sterling. You didn't see me as your children's grandmother, Briar. You saw me as an inexhaustible resource. A means to an end. A wallet with a pulse, convenient to have around, but easily ignored. Sterling tried to interrupt, to protest, to beg, but I held up a hand, a gesture that stopped him cold. No. Let me finish. For years, I kept silent. I swallowed my pain. I told myself it was for the family, for their happiness, for their future. But that day, listening to you plan your grand European adventure without me, celebrating my exclusion, it was the final straw. It shattered the last illusion I had about your love for me, about your character. I took another slow, deliberate sip of my tea, savoring the warmth, the quiet strength it seemed to impart. So, I made a decision. A decision for myself, for my own dignity. I dismantled all the trusts. I cut off all direct payments. The funds, Sterling, are no longer yours to squander. They are no longer available for Briar's latest fashion whims or your daughter's endless demands for expensive trips and gadgets. They are no longer there to bail you out of your own poor financial decisions. Briar gasped, a dramatic, guttural sound. You can't do that. That's our inheritance. That's for our children's future. Arthur wanted us to have it. No, Briar, I said, shaking my head slowly, a faint, almost pitying smile touching my lips. It was my money, entrusted to me by Arthur for my comfort and my discretion. And now, a very significant portion of it is being diverted to a newly established charitable foundation dedicated to forgotten elders. Elders like myself, who have been cast aside, neglected, and taken advantage of by their own families. People who truly need help, who will cherish kindness, not those who merely demand it as a right. Sterling's face crumpled, tears finally welling in his eyes, not from remorse, I suspected, but from pure, unadulterated fear and self-pity. But what about us? What about my future? What about my girls? He gestured wildly at Amelia and Clara, who were now looking genuinely terrified, clinging to each other. I looked at my granddaughters, their faces pale and confused, their comfortable world suddenly crumbling around them. Amelia, Clara, I said gently, my voice softening slightly, for they were, after all, still children, products of their parents' choices. Your tuition has been paid for the current semester. After that, your parents will need to find a way to fund your education. Perhaps public school or scholarships. It will teach you resilience, hard work, the value of effort. Qualities you haven't had to cultivate, thanks to my endless, misguided generosity. Then I turned back to Sterling and Briar, my voice firm, resolute. You are both perfectly capable adults. You both have professions, or at least the potential for them. It's time you stood on your own 2 feet. It's time you learned the value of hard work, of living within your means, of earning your own way. And perhaps, just perhaps, it will teach you the value of gratitude. The value of true family, built on respect, not financial dependency. Sterling started to beg, his voice thick with tears, pleading like a child. "Mother, please. Don't do this. We'll be ruined. We'll lose everything. We'll do anything. We'll include you. We'll take you on the trip. We'll be better, I promise. Just please, Mother, reconsider." Briar echoed his pleas, promising to visit more, to be more attentive, to be the daughter-in-law I had always longed for. Their promises, I knew, were as hollow and transient as their gratitude. I simply looked at them, my heart, which had been broken for so long, finally feeling whole, mended by my own strength. "It's too late, Sterling. The bridge is burned. My decision is made. And for the first time in a very long time, I feel truly free." The confrontation ended with them storming out, a chaotic mixture of rage, desperation, and utter disbelief contorting their faces. They threatened legal action, they threatened to cut me off entirely, to spread malicious rumors about my sanity. I simply nodded, knowing full well that they held no power over me anymore, their threats as empty as their promises. As the door slammed shut behind them, the silence in my cottage was profound, echoing with the finality of my decision. And for the first time, it wasn't a lonely silence. It was a peaceful one, filled with the quiet hum of my own reclaimed life. So, what happened next? Well, the immediate aftermath was precisely as I had predicted. The frantic phone calls escalated into desperate, pleading voicemails, then angry, accusatory texts, each one a testament to their self-absorption and inability to comprehend a world where I wasn't their ATM. Sterling tried to enlist other distant relatives to intervene, painting me as a cruel, senile old woman who had lost her mind and her love for her family. Briar, meanwhile, spread malicious rumors among her social circles about my supposed mental decline, claiming I was no longer fit to manage my own affairs, attempting to discredit me. But my banker, Mr. Davies, and my lawyer, Mrs. Thompson, armed with my clear, concise instructions, comprehensive documentation, and unwavering sound mind, quickly and efficiently shut down any attempts to reverse my decision or challenge my mental competency. Their lives, the ones I had so painstakingly propped up for decades, slowly, painfully, began to unravel. The European trip? Cancelled, the deposits lost. The private chef? A distant, laughable memory. They had to sell Sterling's luxury car, then Briar's. The sprawling suburban house, which they could no longer afford the mortgage on, went up for sale, a forced surrender of their perceived status. They moved into a much smaller, far less opulent home, a stark, undeniable contrast to the lavish lifestyle they had grown accustomed to, a life they now had to actually work for. The girls, Amelia and Clara, did indeed end up in public school, a stark adjustment from their elite private education. I heard through the grapevine that it was a difficult adjustment for them, a profound shock to their system. No more designer clothes, no more elite clubs, no more automatic access to every luxury. They had to learn to live like everyone else, to adapt, to work for what they wanted, to understand the value of a dollar earned. I even heard they took on part-time jobs after school, something I never would have allowed when I was funding their every whim. It broke my heart a little, for them, for their lost innocence, but I knew, with a quiet certainty, that it was a necessary lesson, a brutal but essential forging of character. And my life? My life, freed from the crushing burden of their expectations and manipulations, from the constant drain on my resources and emotional energy, began to blossom in ways I never imagined possible. The peace I felt after the confrontation deepened into a profound sense of serenity, a quiet joy that settled deep within my bones. I took up painting again, a cherished hobby I'd abandoned decades ago, telling myself I didn't have the time, that I had to focus on their needs. My small cottage, once a quiet retreat, became a vibrant studio, filled with canvases depicting sun-drenched landscapes, vibrant portraits of my new friends, and, of course, countless bouquets of chrysanthemums. But the most fulfilling, most profoundly meaningful change was the Forgotten Elders Foundation. With Mr. Davies and Mrs. Thompson's invaluable help, we launched it with vigor and purpose. I became intimately involved, not just financially, but personally. I spent my days volunteering at local senior centers, reading aloud to those whose eyesight was failing, sharing stories with those who rarely had visitors, helping organize outings for those who felt isolated and forgotten. I found myself surrounded by people who were genuinely grateful, whose eyes lit up at the smallest act of kindness, at the simple gift of companionship. I listened to their stories, their struggles, their quiet dignity in the face of neglect and loneliness. And I realized that I wasn't alone. My pain, while deeply personal, was part of a larger, systemic issue, and now I had the means to make a real difference. I made new friends, real friends, people who valued me for my companionship, my experience, my empathy, my shared humanity, not for my bank balance or my ability to solve their problems. I even started taking small, adventurous trips to local botanical gardens, to art museums in nearby cities, even a week-long cruise along the coast. On my own terms, at my own pace, enjoying every moment without the suffocating weight of anyone else's expectations, demands, or complaints. It was a kind of freedom I hadn't realized I was missing until I experienced it. One afternoon, a few months ago, I was sitting in my garden, painting a particularly vibrant rose, its petals unfurling in a symphony of color. The sun was warm on my face, a gentle breeze rustling the leaves, carrying the sweet scent of honeysuckle. I thought of Sterling and Briar, and the girls. I hadn't heard from them in months, not since the last angry, desperate voicemail, which I had long since deleted. And surprisingly, I felt no anger. No resentment. Just a quiet understanding, a sense of closure. And in that moment, brush in hand, sunlight dappling through the leaves, I finally understood the profound lesson this whole painful journey had taught me. I realized that the greatest gift you can give someone isn't money, or endless, stifling support that prevents their growth. It isn't the comfort of a cushioned life, where every challenge is solved by someone else. No. The greatest gift you can give someone is the opportunity to stand on their own 2 feet, to learn resilience, to find their own strength, to discover the true value of their own efforts and hard work. And in doing so, you give yourself the greatest gift of all, the freedom to live your own life, authentically, truthfully, and with unwavering self-respect. It was a hard lesson, learned late in life, at a great cost, but it was, without a doubt, the most liberating one I have ever embraced. That was my story. A painful one, yes, a chapter filled with heartache and betrayal, but ultimately, a story of reclamation, of resilience, and of unexpected, profound joy. Our channel is full of life lessons like this one, stories of triumph, resilience, and finding your true self, no matter your age or circumstances. If you found solace or strength in my words today, if my journey resonated with your own experiences or sparked a new realization, please consider subscribing to our channel and turning on notifications, so you don't miss any of our upcoming stories of human strength and transformation. Now, I'm an old woman, and I've shared my heart with you, laid bare the most vulnerable parts of my journey. What do you think? Did I do the right thing? Was I too harsh, or did I simply do what needed to be done for my own survival, for my own dignity? Share your thoughts with me in the comments below. I'll be reading all of them, eager to hear your perspectives. Thank you for listening.